G'day everybody and welcome back to another Sponge Chat. It's been a minute, but I'm here with another one with a very special guest, Rachael Roberts. Rachael is, I consider her the business mindset queen, and I've heard it used around the internet a few times, and for good reason. She's very, very active within the sort of the EOT freelancers community. In fact, she runs the EOT freelance conferences and things like this. And one of her goals is to help freelancers, achieve their potential. She's also a materials writer. She's written course books. She's written loads of stuff. And I was lucky enough to sit down with her and talk about two elements. So we looked at both business and mindset, and I've kind of combined them into business mindset one. But she did make the distinction that they are different in a sense. So in this Sponge Chat, we did look at the world of freelancing, and we focused mainly on advice for freelancers, and these centered on things really to take into account before one starts, but then also while you are freelancing, some of the things to consider, such as workload, stress, taking breaks, these sorts of things. So I do think this is an important Sponge Chat for those of us that are in the world of freelancing, whether it's freelance materials writing or starting your own business, running your own academy or running your own mini publishing house, whatever it is within the world of language teaching. There are many takeaways from this Sponge that I think will be right for you. So anyway, I'm looking forward to hearing your comments. So please leave a comment or get in touch with the blog, and I look forward to hearing what you think. All right, everyone, take care. All right, Rachael. Well, a huge thank you for being here with me today. Sponge Chat. I don't even know where to start anymore. Sponge Chat started well, a long time ago now, and they've evolved into me speaking with subject matter experts, people that know their stuff, and all sorts of things. And I am lucky enough to have you here with me today, and we're speaking about business and mindset, and I'm really looking forward to getting into that. Because it's something that's obviously very, very important for you. You're very passionate about, but there are also many people within our industry that are very passionate about these things. But as always, I have a very big question at the start. Who is Rachael?
That's such a philosophical question, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Ultimately, whenever anybody answers that question, it's always about the roles that we play rather than who we actually are. But I'm not going to get into too deep, I think, at the beginning of this. I guess from that perspective, anyway, from the roles, I've been in ELT for 30 years now, and I had quite a few different roles really within ELT, so obviously a teacher, worked in private language schools, worked in an FE college, worked at a university, teacher training, CELTA, Delta, CELT-YL at one point, and then materials writer. I've been a manager as well, been a DOS. And, all of that time, I think has in many ways fed into what I do now, because I do really understand the industry very well. And I've also, all the way through, really, I think I've been very interested in helping people solve problems, helping them generate ideas, working directly with people, I guess. And, that's why I really love what I'm doing now.
That's, you've had many hats then, many different hats, many different roles, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And obviously 30 years is a very long time to be in any sort of industry. And when we think about sort of the turnover within our industry, and unfortunately how many people leave, it's quite rare to have someone that's been in the industry for such a long time. So I call you when people ask me about, do you know Rachel? I say, yes, that's the business mindset queen That's what I call you. That's my label. Um, and I don't know if you accept that or not, but perhaps we can think about that. Your current sort of not even a role really. It's your passion. How did you move into this, and why?
So I think, as I say, I think it's kind of been coming a long time, really. I mean, I actually trained as a counselor and psychotherapist about 20 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
And that came about because, well, I think there were two things. I think one was my own kind of experience. So I had a couple of experiences of burnout. And I realized after the second time that a lot of this was, I mean, obviously, the people I was working for definitely had some responsibility, but a lot of it was also me, like, people pleasing, wanting to be perfect, worrying about what people thought too much, all of that kind of thing definitely led to it. So I kind of started exploring learning more about me, really, in the first place. And then also I was a CELTA tutor at that point, and, working with people in very stressful situations. And I had a couple of things like, where people burst into tears in feedback, and I kind of thought, actually, I've really got people's lives in my hands here. I need to understand a bit more about what I'm doing, not just from a teaching point of view. So that was kind of the start, in a way, of that side of things, of the sort of psychology side, which I started with a 6-week introduction course and thought that would be fine, and ended up doing 3 years of training because I just found it so interesting,
Yeah.
And then in terms of business, I think, I've learned a lot myself. I've been self-employed, had my own business since 2008. And I do, I've said this before, but you mentioned like people leaving the business. I just think, on the one hand, I love ELT because I think the people in it are great. And on the other hand, I hate it because I think everybody is exploited and overworked, and they don't value themselves enough either. And so I kind of want to change both of those things.
That's very big mission, big objective.
just a little bit, yeah.
Just a little bit. Yeah, I mean, you touched on. I like how you separate that, and I remember in our sort of correspondence before this, you said that they are kind of separate, the mindset and then the business aspects there. Before we go into some other questions, perhaps I'd like to just go into that element of burnout and responsibility, because actually recently, one of my teachers, she's sick at the moment, but it's happened many times with other teachers where, there's my cat for everyone else that he's just playing around.
That's bomb, actually, but yes.
Yeah. But my teachers and people that I've worked with, and myself as a teacher as well, we often have this idea of, like, when we're calling in sick, a few things have happened. One, we have this sort of, and I don't think this is just in teaching in general, but around the world, where we have to go in because we're going to let the team down, or we have to put work before ourselves, or we have to make ourselves sound sufficiently sick in order so that our managers believe that we're sick. And so I like what you mentioned about this idea of responsibility. There's certainly a part of the ethos of the organization, the culture in which everything happens, but there's also that personal element there as well. And it seems like that's something that you're trying to change in saying, no, you need to take care of yourself first. It's you before work. When perhaps that I imagine that's quite a difficult task to achieve with some people, because we have such a culture of, be the worker. Is that, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely, teaching is kind of comes under caring professions, I think. And I think within caring professions, it attracts people who care. And obviously, that's not a bad thing. But we do also need to care about ourselves. I mean, Denise Duffield Thomas, who is a writer about kind of money mindset mostly, but she talks about how, and I think particularly when it's your own business, but this applies generally, that we are kind of like the golden goose. And if we don't look after the golden goose, it'll stop laying the golden eggs. So you kind of have to do that first, because otherwise you are going to end up leaving ELT or even making yourself ill, or you've got to see the bigger picture, I think. And it's not about being selfish, it's a practical thing as much as anything.
Yeah, definitely. But I also think that this is where, obviously you work with a lot of freelancers, but perhaps this is something that managers working in organizations can take sort of heed of, in the sense that, I think I view it as our responsibility to, if teachers are trying to put themselves before, put work before themselves, we need to say to them, stop. It's, put yourself first, look after your own health. So I think there's a shared responsibility there, which is quite interesting. But thinking about the business, if we go back over to the business, you mentioned that obviously you're also a business owner. You run your own business. You're self-employed, and you work with people that are in this sort of self-employed world. I suppose, what are well, first of all, what is a business mindset, if we wanted to combine those two, and what are some of the challenges that come with trying to be self-employed, trying to open up your own business within ELT?
So, I mean, I think, I do kind of separate it in a way, because I think, there's all of the business skills and strategies and, understanding how to market yourself and all of that kind of thing. And there's the mindset stuff. But there is also a kind of business mindset, I think, which is about seeing yourself as a business. And that might sound really obvious, but the number of people that I talk to who basically don't, they still see themselves as employed, in the sense that they don't allow time for running the other aspects of the business. So they're completely focused on the teaching, let's say, and they kind of fit in a bit of, marketing and strategizing here and there, like in their spare time almost, and then wonder why they feel exhausted. They're not seeing it as a business, or they're charging the same amount that they used to get paid when they worked for a school, and not kind of thinking, well, hang on a minute, now I've got the overheads that the school used to have, so there is that just very basic thing of, and lots of people saying to me, oh no, I don't have a business, I'm a freelancer, and I'm always like, yeah, you do.
Yeah, that's I've never thought about it like that. And also I've spoken to a lot of freelancers on these sponge chats, and actually a number of times the idea of being a freelancer has come up. We've spoken about that, and it's quite interesting how many of them who are very experienced freelancers noted these challenges, and most of them centers actually on in our conversation focus on the financial aspects of understanding that and selling yourself at the right price, if you will, although saying it like that sounds wrong. But yeah, but that's quite interesting. And so how, if someone is to view themselves as a business, if you're a freelancer viewing yourself, I mean, how do we go about that? What's the key element there?
So I think it is thinking about what are all the different aspects that are involved in running a business. So, there's going to be the whole thing of getting the clients in the first place. So that's going to involve marketing. It's going to involve admin. It's going to involve time to talk to prospective clients, selling. Then, there's things like the client admin, full stop. I mean, most people don't really set aside time for that. They just kind of squeeze it in, and they don't come up with systems for it. I mean, especially nowadays, a lot of things can actually be automated. And yet, I spoke to somebody a while back who had quite a big, successful business where they employed lots of other teachers, and they were still doing all of the invoices individually themselves, because they were kind of too busy to think about how to make a system to make that better. Do you know what I mean? So some of it is just about stepping back and kind of going like, okay, hang on a minute, this is a business. I can't necessarily do everything myself, for one thing, and maybe there are better ways of doing this, and I need to give myself time to think of that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, obviously I work in academic management, some of the director of studies of an academy as well, and so deal with all this stuff. Obviously I'm employed to do this, by my director. And I obviously don't do everything. We share a lot of the responsibilities, but that idea of having systems in place is actually one of our kind of our mantras, to make sure the system's in place, and then we keep using the system until the system breaks, and then we're trying to evaluate and find the new system. But there needs to be those systems, and so I think that's a very good point. And also, you mentioned this idea of being like a freelance or self-employed and stuff, and it's not necessarily just working with yourself at times. That you may be employing people, you may be working with other freelancers, things like that. That's something a big thing to consider as well, I think. So, but if there are people that are, so perhaps there are actually, let's take a step back. Why would people want to be self-employed? And because we're gonna go on to sort of the things they need to consider before being freelance or self-employed or starting their own business. But what's the reason to be self-employed? I mean, I know there are many, but perhaps we could talk about a few.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, I actually did a survey into this a couple of years ago, and the biggest one by far was freedom and flexibility.
Okay.
So it wasn't for most people about the money. I mean, I think you can definitely earn more as a freelancer than being self-employed, but the biggest thing was just having that ability, if you like, to be able to decide, okay, I'm going to take this time off, or I'm going to be able to go and see my kids' school play, or, all of those sorts of things, which I think is a huge advantage, which is why it's so ironic in a way that that's why people go freelance. And then they take on like so much work at such a low rate that they actually can't do any of those things.
Right. Yeah.
They often end up much more overloaded than they were previously in their job. So, I think that is something definitely to think about. And then I think the other reason can be, and perhaps should be, to have more control over your income.
Yeah.
Because you really can, you have potential, let's say, in a way that you don't in a job.
Yeah. So if those are perhaps three really of the big reasons there: freedom, flexibility, and perhaps control over the income. If they want that, if people want this, and they're looking to be then, what are the main considerations? And you've already mentioned one, and that's perhaps that's actually mentioning two: taking on work, but taking on the right work at the right price, I suppose. What are some other considerations that should probably in the minds of people looking to take on or to be self-employed or to go freelance?
I mean, I do think to a degree there is a kind of personality that's more suited to it, if you like. I think some people just really don't want to be bothered with having to think about all of these things, and they would rather just, go in, do their job, get their salary, and absolutely, no judgment at all. I think if that suits you, that's probably what you should be doing. And whereas I think some people do kind of enjoy the possibilities and the challenge and the fact that you can change things and come up with an idea and then implement it, and I suppose that's part of the freedom for some people. And so I think if you're that kind of person, you're probably going to be happier working for yourself than being in a sort of 9 to 5. In terms of sort of other things to think about, I do think practically, I mean, I'm not, one of these coaches that is kind of, go freelance and within 6 weeks you'll be earning 6 figures, and, because it kind of doesn't usually work that way. It takes time for sure. And so I think, it takes time. I mean, I think it is possible. I'm sure that there are, ELT freelancers who are earning 6 figures. In fact, I know there are. But I would say for most people, it's not going to be about that. It's going to be about having a good income that is more under your control, if you like. But to get there does take a bit of time and effort and trying things out. So I think I would generally recommend either have like a financial cushion before you start,
Right.
or do it gradually. I mean, that's what I did. You know, I
Yep.
was kind of working 5 days a week, and then 4, and then 3, you know, and
Yep.
then kind of took the leap.
And before you took that leap, then were there still things that you were sort of anxious about, worried about, or because you'd done it so gradually over time, you were like, okay, no, this is going to be successful, it's going to be fine?
It's an element of, you know, will this be okay? But the fact of the matter is that nothing is ever certain, you know, so you can be made redundant from your job overnight. Do you know what I mean? At least with a business, if things are not working, you can see it coming and do something about it.
Yeah.
You know, I actually feel, I mean, I definitely have wobbly moments regularly, but I generally feel much more secure with things under my own control.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, like over the pandemic, I mean, I lost the writing work I was supposed to be doing, and I lost 90% of my royalty income, like pretty much overnight. So, you know, I don't know what that would be like. My income dropped by about 95% overall.
Wow.
Whereas I was able to kind of then go, right, okay, so I'm going to start this group program. I'm going to, you know, and I could do something about it.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, we don't ever have complete control because that's life, but you have more as a freelancer, I think, rather than less.
Thing. Okay. Yeah, obviously the pandemic showed a lot of people that how unstable at times, even stable places can be, you know, when there's crises. I want to go back to a point that you mentioned about this idea of personality. And obviously we're both probably thinking anyone could do it if they have the right skills and things like that. But thinking about the people that are successful at it, are there certain, and it's not just personality, but perhaps characteristics that they display? I'm probably thinking things like they're quite proactive. They're able to deal with perhaps stress. Are there other sort of characteristics that you throw into the pool there?
Well, I think it's more about dealing with uncertainty than necessarily dealing with stress, because you kind of manage stress better as a freelancer, because you can kind of think, right, I'm going for a nap, or I'm going out for a walk, or do you know what I mean? You've got that more control.
Yeah.
But it is a bit scarier because it's sort of all on your shoulders. So I think you have to, I mean, I did a video about this recently about something called strategic mindset. And that I do think is like really key, because strategic mindset is not just being able to kind of come up with strategies, but it's about recognizing that essentially everything's like a series of experiments, and not being too attached to them working necessarily, because sometimes they will and sometimes they won't. And that's okay, kind of thing. So I think if you're the kind of person that massively beats yourself up if everything isn't perfect, I'm not saying you can't run your own business, but you're going to find it a bit more painful.
More painful, yeah.
So I think just seeing it as, I'm going to try this out, I'm going to see what happens. And I also, another big thing I talk about a lot is having like a minimum viable product, as they say. You know, so don't kind of set yourself up by spending a year, you know, creating something and then find out that actually nobody wants it. You know, start with small things. In fact, generally start with small things, and small steps is the way to go.
I suppose that's probably a good reason why to do things gradually, or to work in an area where you're familiar with it. I mean, I know a lot of teacher educators, they generally move into freelance teacher educating because they have the experience teacher educating. Materials writers, they start out, you know, at the same time working and then materials writing, and then they kind of gradually go there. But I like the idea of the MVP. It's an important concept to keep in mind. I suppose with all of this though, comes this idea of money. Now, one of the questions that I wrote to you was, you know, is money a dirty word? and should we be talking about it more? Often, in conversations with friends, there's this kind of unwritten or unspoken rule that kind of you don't speak about money. And I'm not sure if I agree with that. So I'd like to hear your perspective on that.
Well, I mean, for me, it's like saying, oh, we shouldn't talk about food. Like, oh no, I mean, I know we all have to eat, but oh, it's a bit, déclassé to talk about food, isn't it?
Mm,
It's ridiculous, really, I think. Or we
mm,
shouldn't talk about air or sunshine, or do you know what I mean? Money is a basic fact in our life.
mm,
It's a form of exchange. We happen to use money. We could be bartering still. If
mm,
you know what I mean, it's the same thing, really. So I also feel that the kind of people often who encourage us not to talk about money are the ones who actually don't want us to have any.
mm.
And it's like, oh no, I don't want you to discuss what you're being paid with your colleagues, or
Important.
with other
Yeah.
people on your writing project, or well, I wonder why not. Could that be because we might find out things that would make life awkward for you?
Yeah.
No, we should definitely be talking about money.
Mm. You mentioned this idea of transparency.
Mm,
Uh, and I can imagine that many employers listening to this or watching this thinking, but how do I deal with that? Because obviously there are people that are paid more, there are people paid
mm,
less, there are
mm,
people more qualified, there are people with more experience, there are people
mm,
that've been in the company longer. And obviously I'm thinking more of a company context, but also
mm,
if the freelancer or a self-employed person is the manager of this
mm.
business, should there be transparency at all levels?
Well,
And if so, or if not, why or why not?
I mean, ultimately, it's all a negotiation,
Mm,
because negotiation is not just about what happens when you sit in the room and decide on your salary,
mm,
or whatever that context may be. And obviously, it's in the interest of the people who are paying the money to keep that as low as possible, and that's fine.
mm,
Um, from their perspective, I can see why they would want to be doing that. But from our perspective, it's the other way around.
mm.
So, we don't have to accept what works against us, I guess is what I'm saying. But also, they don't have to accept what works against them. We have to try and find a compromise, probably,
Yeah.
that works for both of us. But, I think when you see this is, I mean, I don't really talk that much about jobs because I work with freelancers, but when I see adverts for jobs that don't tell you what they pay,
Mm,
it absolutely infuriates me. And I've experienced the same thing from publishers as well, where they want you to spend a week writing a sample, but they won't tell you what the job's going to pay. And it's insane.
yeah.
Like, why would I invest a week of my time only to then be told that it's a ridiculous figure that
Yeah.
I can't possibly live on? We've got to change some of these things, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. And that's one of the things that we make sure that obviously as a director of studies, we will look for teachers every year. And over the past few years, we've changed our approach, our tack to that. And one of the things that we do now is make it very explicit the range of salary that we have,
Mm,
and all the benefits and all the responsibilities that come with that. Because I do think it is important to have an idea of what you're going to apply for beforehand,
mm,
but also for the managers.
mm,
You don't want to get to go through all that process and then have someone say no because you're not offering the right amount of money or there's too
mm,
many responsibilities or these sorts of things. So I think that's transparency is clear, especially at that stage.
mm.
And I imagine in the world of freelancing, that's quite an important element within your sort of like the how you're sifting through all of the jobs, the possible jobs, right? So
Mm,
and in saving you time or even all that work, as you mentioned, that's quite an important thing to consider.
mm.
Would you say that it's commonplace for freelancers to find jobs where the price is or the fee that's going to be paid is advertised, or is it less common?
I still think there's a tendency not to say what it is. And, you know, it's about trying to hook people in so that they feel that they've already, you know, it's the sunk cost fallacy. They've already put this effort in. So therefore they might as well take it, if you like. And, you know, that's a strategy. But I would like people to be aware of that, I guess.
Yes, good point.
So that they can counter it. But yes, I think it is still quite common as a strategy, but it's not one I like.
Yes, I don't like it either. All right, so let's think about your brand, building your own brand. And this is something that you talk about a lot online. You have your courses that you work with coaching in this. What are some pieces of advice? I know you can't give us everything, but what are a few pieces of advice that you have for people who are considering to build their own brand? They're considering building their own brand. They want to build themselves into something more. What have we got? What can we do?
So, you know, I think there's kind of two different strands to this in a way. So I think there are the people who want to continue working for other companies, but in a freelance way. And then there are the people who want to kind of produce their own thing, whether that's teaching students or providing training courses or being consultants or, you know, whatever. So they're slightly different approaches. What they have in common, I think, is that they both need to be really clear about who it is that is kind of like their ideal client, if you like, and what that ideal client is really looking for. So, you know, and why they're a good match, obviously. So, you know, if we're talking about a writer who wants work from publishers, then I think it's about working out, well, what kind of publishers do you want to work with? What kind of material do you really want to be known for? And that doesn't mean that you can't write other things. But if you become a bit of a specialist, I think you're just much more likely to be referred and remembered and get more work, basically, as a result. And the good thing about getting more work is not necessarily even doing more work, but having more options. Because I do often speak to people who are like, well, you know, it's really not a good rate, but I haven't got anything else on the horizon, you know, and they're just waiting like a little baby bird for things to drop into their mouth. You know, so I think that getting yourself out there can help with that so that you have more choice, basically. And then if you want to set up your own thing, then it's about all of that plus working out, well, what is that thing? What do they really want?
Right.
What's going to help them? And then how can I actually market that?
Yeah. So then so obviously someone could start their own academy, someone could start their own language teaching organization, their own language teaching company. That's fine. And I suppose that comes with its own sort of stuff. But freelancers for like materials writing and all the other shebang that comes with EOT, is it finding your niche then?
Well, I'm a big fan of that, I have to say, because, you know, people often think that this is about limiting what you do, and they don't want to do it as a result of that, because they think, oh no, well, you know, maybe I won't get enough work and maybe I'll get bored with doing the same thing. But it's not really about that because, well, in terms of getting enough work, I think we're still coming to understand that, I mean, the world is a very different place than it was 20 years ago. And the number of potential employers / clients out there is massive, you know, because it used to kind of be you had a contact at one publisher and, you know, that was kind of where your work came from. And it's just not like that anymore. And then I think I've lost my train of thought now. What was the question again?
No, we're talking about finding your niche.
Okay, yeah. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, you know, niche is all about marketing. It's all about what you want people to know you for, to remember you for, to refer you for. It's not necessarily about what you're actually doing, you know, so you can have a particular niche, but you can still do whatever you like.
Yeah. Okay.
It doesn't mean you're not allowed to do anything else.
Yeah, I like that. Don't box yourself in,
Mm,
personally. Still have that niche, still advertise yourself, still market yourself,
mm.
but still be open to other things.
Yeah.
Interesting. And obviously, we're talking about advice here, and so people can do that. They have that thing. They need to make it clear to themselves. But if they're looking for support in that, perhaps they're looking for more of a coaching element in there. We know that you have your courses online. So you've got the Earn, Learn, Thrive, and then you have your coaching sessions. Can you talk us a little bit about that if someone's looking for some more information?
Sure, yeah. So, basically, I mean, there's a lot of information out there. You can read books, you can watch YouTube videos. And I think, the reason why you would come and do my group program would be because you want to have help to kind of work out what of that is actually relevant to you specifically, what will work within an ELT context, which obviously is something I know a lot about. And then you also want help with implementing it and actually doing it and being sort of, guided through that process and having somebody that you can kind of go, oh, what do I do now? Or help, I don't quite understand this. And it's not just me, because it's a group program. You've also got support from the other people on the program. And, it can be quite lonely running your own business. So having that kind of, support from a group of people who've all got, relatively similar goals and experiences, I think is really helpful. And then, of course, that's where the mindset stuff comes back in as well, because, we're all going to come up against worrying that perhaps, we're not as good as everybody else, or perhaps we're charging too much, or all of these things, and being able to work through that as well can really help people to make progress on something that perhaps they've been thinking about for a long time but just not really ever doing.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I do hope I'll put links to obviously to your site in the blog post, and so I hope that people come and speak with you, because I have actually spoken to a lot of people that have done your courses and have worked with you, and they've spoken very positively of them. And obviously, all of them are freelancers; they have their own business and things like that. And in fact, you can see the changes. I'm not going to name names here, but you can see the changes in their approach to what you say, marketing, making themselves known. Through the world of social media and things like that. There's a distinct difference there. And which is obviously really positive. So that's really nice to say. We come to the last section of Sponge Chats, and I always say it's my favorite because I love books, and I can see it's very rare that I'm jealous of the bookshelf. Like, I have loads of books in my house, and I have these bookshelves, and they're all full of other things. And I look at your bookshelves, and I immediately filled with jealousy. I'm like, oh my God, they're amazing. So my question is, what book recommendations do you have for those looking to either to get better in business or to developing the right mindset?
Okay, so I was thinking, I mean, there are quite a lot of books. I think it does depend on what you're struggling with. So in terms of money mindset, I would recommend Denise Duffield Thomas. She's just renamed her core book, and it's now called Chill and Prosper. It was The Chilled Entrepreneur, I think, before. She's a little bit woo-woo, which isn't to everybody's taste. But the messages that she has in that book really can be quite life-changing. She kind of makes you go, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way. So I really recommend that one. In terms of marketing and messaging, I think it would have to be Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. And I did a post about that last month, actually, on May the 4th, Star Wars Day, because he talks a lot about how we can use stories to get messages across, but also to understand things ourselves. And one of the things he says, which was a real light bulb moment for me when I read it, was he said, people think that when they're running their business or marketing their business, that they're Luke Skywalker, that they're kind of the hero. but they're not their Yoda, right? And the client is Luke Skywalker, and our job is, you know, to be the guide, not to be the hero. And actually that helps people a lot, I find, because a lot of people within ELT don't want to be the hero. They don't want to be, you know, like bragging, as they would put it, on social media. And if you can reposition that, which it genuinely is, as you're guiding people, you're helping people, that's much more comfortable.
Definitely.
And then the third one,
hit me,
which is a book which I really love, and again I think it's potentially life-changing, is The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And he talks about, I mean, there's lots of ideas in there, but one of the key ideas is that we make like this self-imposed glass ceiling for ourselves. And that when we get close to it, we will find ways to make sure that we don't go beyond it.
Right.
You know, and it's so true when you think about it. You know, it's like he says, most people who win the lottery end up back where they started, because they just kind of can't cope with having that money. You know, and I think we all have a bit of that. And once you see it, you start to see yourself doing it, like, oops, I've forgotten to do this thing that could actually make a huge difference to my business. I wonder why that is, you know. So that's a great book, I think.
Okay, I'll have to check them out. I mean, these are 3 books that I haven't been recommended. Of course, we haven't really spoken about this on Sponge yet. And myself, I haven't actually looked at them, so I'm looking forward to digging a little bit deeper. But and I'll put links to all of them there in the blog post for those that are interested.
Right.
You mentioned this idea of glass ceiling, and it's just that this is a random question that's just come to me now. I remember we saw each other at I8FO, and you were out with the people that had been part of your cohorts, we'll call them that. And I was shocked to see that they were all women, and I wonder if taking on this mindset can be in it, because if you look at education in general, you know, there's a staggering amount of female presence. Yet if you look at perhaps the leaders or the managers, it's obviously not a lot of them are focused in female positions. Do you think this idea of business and mindset can be empowering to the women in our industry?
Yeah, I think definitely. There, you know, obviously, as you say, there are a lot of women within ELT. And so that can always be part of like what's happening, if you know what I mean. But it is noticeable, definitely, that the men tend to do better, if that's the way to put it. I do work with men, by the way. I do, but I would say that it's probably about 5%.
Right.
And I don't think that is representative, probably, of the industry as a whole, although I haven't looked into it. And I think it's partly because of the way that I approach things. So there's a term like bro marketing. I don't come across that, but you know, it's all of this kind of, you know, men leaning back on Lamborghinis, you know, talking about multiple 6 figures, blah blah. I don't do that kind of thing, and so I think, I'm not saying all men are attracted by that kind of thing, but some are, for sure. And I do quite a lot of work on mindset, and I think women are often a bit more open to that. So men have mindset blocks too, for sure,
of course,
but they don't necessarily want to admit to it or talk about it. I think women are a bit more open to that, perhaps. But yes, I mean, I think, you know, I think it is helping, hopefully. Certainly those people, I know it's helped.
Interesting. Yeah, it was just an odd thought that I had, and obviously I'm doing a lot of reading at the moment on management, and looking at some of the differences between men and women in management and running business and things like that. And it's quite interesting looking at this, and it seems that your courses, or this idea of that, can be quite empowering to a lot of people, not only women, but men and women in general, but certainly women. But anyway, I'll leave links, and everyone can go check you out, and they can continue this discussion further with you at a later date. Well, Rachel, thank you very much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to another Sponge Chat in the future, seeing you at IETEFL. Who knows, right?
Who knows, indeed. No, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you as well.
All right, Rachel. Cheers. Bye.